Hello everyone, it's Pokey and welcome back to my channel. Now, since my last video like this, quite a lot has happened, which I will get into a little bit, but I want to start off by saying happy birthday to Reki Kyan, which is the character that I'm actually starting this animation off with. Just to give an idea of the timeline of this animation, I started this in March 2024 and I finished it in March 2025. A whole year. I'll actually be talking about a couple of things that have happened within that time, including why I decided to finish this animation that TikTok so loved in the first place, and we'll get into that as well. And of course it wouldn't have taken as long if I'd worked on it more consistently, but you know, life happens. For this animation, my process was broken up into 5 main components: sketch, line art, colors, shading, and editing. I'll also include an intermission in the video to shed a little light on my process for getting this time-lapse because I think it deserves to be highlighted. But without further ado, let's get into it. Yeah, get into it. All right, let me log in for real, hold on. Now let's talk about the first process that I went through, sketching. As you saw, my primary focus with this was laying out my keyframes, which are the main frames that show movement. So Reki here had 3 main keyframes, which I have here on the screen. From those keyframes, I drew secondary frames, which I think of as extensions of the keyframes. So it's the keyframes, but a slight variation in movement. This not only helps me see the action better, but it also helps me to start thinking about timing. And once I get the timing down, I can start working on in-betweens. In-betweens are frames that fill up that timing laid out by the keyframes and also make the movement smoother. Something that also helps me keep track of my frames when I get to this portion of the process is writing down numbers next to the frames and highlighting what the keyframes are. That way, if there's an issue in timing, I know where to start from again. I mainly focused on Reki's movements, and I considered his jacket part of his body in that regard because it didn't have as much movement as, say, something like his hair. I kept his headband and his hair separate and also in one layer because they are complementary to his movements. So his movements dictate how, especially his hair, moves. Getting the movements of the body down lays a solid foundation for freer things like hair and clothes. Furthermore, it was a lot easier for me to work with these 2 main components separately because Reki's hair is at a length where it actively reacts to head movements and just overall body movements. And you can see me figuring that out here. I broke up his hair into sections and I worked on that section throughout the frames. This lessened the complexity of this portion, considering I could block out his hair. And although all this sounds great in theory, animation is a very hands-on process. When it came on to things like timing, figuring out how the hair moved, a lot of it just came from replaying the animation and seeing how things worked together. And you could see me starting to sketch out a couple ideas for how I wanted the end to be with both Chibi Reki and Chibi Longa. But that essentially wraps up the sketching process, and now we move on to line art. Now, at this point throughout the production, it was around May 2024, which isn't too far in, considering the larger timeline, but line art has always been a tedious process for me, and that certainly did not change with this animation. One thing that was different was my goal of refining my style in animation, especially when it came on to details. I've always had a habit of simplifying my art style when I animate, especially frame by frame, which is a common practice with character design especially, but I wanted to imagine what would my art style look like if it was an actual anime. Would I actually be able to put out that type of quality if I really applied myself? And that was one of the questions that I had in my mind constantly as I worked throughout this production, and what kept me motivated to see my style in something greater. I mean, there really isn't much to say about this process. I wanted to experiment with different line weights when it came onto the smaller details. So if you notice the parts where I'm working on the line art, I keep a consistent line weight for the majority of the line art, And when it comes down to smaller details like his facial features, his eyelashes, details in his hair, details in his eyebrows, I went for a smaller line weight. Another thing that you'll notice is that I jump around quite a bit in these steps, so it's not just straight 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, I worked on this over the course of a year, so I did jump around quite a bit. You'll see that at one point I am starting to work on Langa's keyframes, and the same things apply when I was working on Reki. Also, yes, I did decide to give Reki dimples because they look adorable on him. We need more dimple appreciation. To lessen the horror that was line art to me at the time, I went with a similar process as I did with the sketching, especially when it came down to his hair. So as you notice, I decided to block off portions of his hair and work on those throughout the frames. So I would hone in on a section and make sure that that section was consistent throughout the animation. And for those who are not familiar with digital time lapses, all of that flashing you see in this line art process, they are lines that I have drawn over and over and over and over again. So I can certainly say that line art was the most tedious process for this animation overall. But again, breaking it up into smaller pieces makes it a lot more doable. And you can see that I carry this process over into other parts of Reki, like sections of his jacket. Also, I just realized this, but the way how I worked on this animation makes it look like both Reki and Langa are reacting to each other's reactions, and I might actually start crying. They are so adorable. Now, when it came on to Langa's hair in the sketching process, I had to pay a lot more attention because his hair movements were more subtle in a sense. His movements weren't as dynamic as Reki's in the beginning, so I had to be a lot more intentional with how I sectioned off parts and how I made them move and layer on top of each other. And the same thing goes for Langa with line art. I stuck with one line weight for the general line art, and then when it came on to smaller details, I would work with slightly smaller line weights. Before I start talking about colors, it is now intermission time. Alrighty. For this intermission, I would like to talk about my process for exporting the very time lapse you see on your screen. Spoiler alert, it was not an easy process. Let's talk about it. To start off with context, I animated this on my iPad in Flip-a-Clip. My iPad has 32 gigabytes. Because I've had a long history with animation, editing, and art, especially in these past 5 years, there is a lot on my iPad. More specifically, Alight Motion had about 8 gigabytes, Ibis Paint had about 4 gigabytes, and Flip-a-Clip had about 7. And this was purely out of the projects across all 3 apps that I had done. Because of this, and obviously other stuff that are not art related on my iPad, I did not have that much space to work with. This translated into the quality of the time-lapse that I exported from Flip-a-Clip. When I tried to export the time-lapse for the first time, it came up to about 1 gigabyte. And when I backed it up and tried to play it on my laptop to edit, it would not play. I thought it was just an issue with the processing since I knew it was gonna be a big file, but a week passed and it still would not play. I concluded that this was because my iPad simply did not have enough space to back up the time lapse. So my goal was to free up enough space on my iPad so that I could properly export the time lapse and actually have it be available. My approach to this started with Alight Motion, considering it took up the most space. So I went through backing up as many projects as I could. This process did come with its own rough patches, but I was eventually able to clear up enough space to re-download Ibis Paint. It was offloaded. So when I downloaded Ibis Paint again, I went through and backed up each of my drawings individually. There were over 200 of them, nearly 300. And after that, I had some issues actually backing them up elsewhere. So that in itself took a while, and that was very frustrating. I tried doing it from my iPad, but just the lack of space made it very laggy, and I had to retry with the same file multiple times for different files. So I was actually able to do this on my laptop instead, and that process went a lot smoother. After I was sure that all of my Ibis drawings backed up, I uninstalled IBIS and I freed up even more space, which ultimately gave me the opportunity to properly export the time lapse. Yippee! So I was able to export the time lapse, and the actual size of the video was over 2 gigabytes. So that was amazing. That was fun. But what was even more fun was actually seeing that my work was not in vain. So, moral of the story, guys, always back up your projects externally. Do not rely on your device always functioning, because trust me, there will come a time when it won't, and it will not be fun. So don't be like me, guys. But you live and you learn, and I'm glad that I was able to successfully share this with you all. And that, dear viewers, is the end of intermission time. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get back to the video. The next process I went through was coloring. Now at this point throughout production, it was around October 2024. I was halfway throughout my semester, which was rough in its own right. However, I saw an Instagram post about the sk8 OVA. I said, huh? Just for context, as a sk8 the Infinity fan, the initial season aired in 2021. It has been 4 years since there has been any updates about this anime. Then on one fine Saturday afternoon, I see that sk8 is getting a continuation. Oh my gosh. So at this point, I said, let me lock in. October 24 was pretty special to me in multiple ways. Not only was it the time that I started picking up this animation again, but I also had a chance to go to Lightbox Expo for the first time. Let me know if y'all would like me to make a video on that separately, but here are some pictures and videos from my time there with my friend Mia. There even came a point when I was working on this animation on the plane to California. It was crazy. After Lightbox, I did have to lock in though. I had the rest of the semester to deal with and life in general. But for this process, coloring and shading are a little combined. I didn't make a separate layer for shading because I wanted to experiment more with laying out the shadows within the line art. So if you notice, as I'm filling in these areas, I already have most of the sections specified, so it makes it a lot easier when that process came along. I think one of the most challenging parts of this process was the threshold on Flip-A-Clip. As you can see, there were moments when I was trying to fill in the colors and it would bleed out into the background. It was very tedious, but it worked out in the end, and I'm happy about that. For the smaller areas of shadow especially, I did have to draw it in manually, but that wasn't too bad. I didn't want to go too crazy on shading for this animation. As you notice, I did put a gradient in both Reki and Longa's hair to act as the shading for that, and then I added a couple highlights at the top. I also realized that I didn't draw Reki's logo on his jacket prior in the line art, so I had to put that in separately. I worked on Longa a little bit during November, but the bulk of me finishing this up came in March. And at this point, we had a final release date for sk8 the Infinity Extra Part, the OVA. I said, oh shoot, I have this sk8 animation I've been working on for literal ages. I should probably finish it up. And then spring break came around. This right here, y'all, was the definition of the grind. From March 16th to March 20th, I worked on this animation straight. Of course I slept, but I worked on it all day, every day. From the 19th to the 20th, I did pull an all-nighter. I stayed up till about 7 in the morning, and I think I posted it on TikTok that same morning, and then I passed out. The video is also available on here and on Instagram if you have not seen it yet. And speaking of Instagram, I actually did live stream a couple times when I was working on this, and I did get a lot of input from my broadcast channel about this video's existence in the first place, so I would like to shout them out real quick. If you want an opportunity to have input on videos like this or a chance to be in a future video, be sure to join my broadcast channel on Instagram. I also plan on showing more works in progress, so be sure to look out for that as well. But I think it's safe to say that TikTok loved it. Let's go through some TikTok comments. I would like to start off with these few comments right here because they're essentially saying the same thing. And listen, if Studio Bones wanted me to join their production, I would be so down. Matter of fact, I have a message for them.
スタジオボンズさん、あなたの作品が大好きです。お仕事のご依頼も受けたまわっておりますので、ぜひ私のスキルを活かさせてください。ありがとうございます。インディーでもプロでも他のアニメスタジオでも同じです。ぜひ連絡を取り合いましょう。 And I'm gonna say that last part in English as well. If there are any indie or professional animation studios who may have seen this video or have seen the final video and really like my work, I am available for work. So for any business inquiries or job offers, here's my email. Thank you. I appreciate these two comments so much because these were both last minute decisions that I made in the chibi version of Reki, but I thought that they would fit perfectly with his reactions and just the vibe I was going for with this animation. So thank you guys for noticing. I really appreciate it. I'm also really glad that people see themselves in my art, and I really want to spread that positivity. So I just wanted to highlight this and say that you are valid just the way you are. Own it and be proud, period. And then I wanted to include a silly one at the very least. I love this comment so much. It made me chuckle. I also wanted to say that not only are my commissions still open, but in my animation commissions, this animation is one of the newer examples of one of my previous listings. So feel free to check that out. The link is in the description below, along with my bio on here and on Instagram. After I was finished animating in Flip-a-Clip, I exported it on a green screen and I did a little bit of editing in a light motion. This related to the background, so I did a little bit of simple shape movement with the squares, and that was basically it. As I mentioned before, this animation was a way for me to experiment with developing my style in animation in a way that's more true to my illustrations. And looking back on it, I think I did a damn good job. There were a lot of things that I learned throughout this process that I'll definitely be taking with me to future projects. And speaking of, I'm currently working on a short romance film. I'll be posting updates about it both on my Instagram and my Twitter, same handle. We've been working really hard on it behind the scenes, and I'm lucky enough to be the person in charge of the art and animation. So I am very, very much excited, and I hope y'all are too. If you'd like to see me expand upon anything that I mentioned in this video, please comment below, let me know what it is and what you're looking forward to hearing more about. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like what you saw, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a like under the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.